Everything you need to know about products and services that can improve your life. This is Experts on Call on CL 650.
And you're listening to Experts on Call on CL 650. I'm Joanne Sutton, and joined in the studio today are the insurance experts. We have Patrick Magnuson and Keith Story from Intact Insurance, along with Andrew Tablotny of Laguerre Pelling Insurance. So today we're talking in detail about how insurance works when you're a landlord and have a rental property. We've just covered that off, but what about switching gears to having an insurance policy when you're the tenant? You mentioned earlier that as an owner, you need to have your own insurance on the contents of your property. So who wants to talk about some of the questions you can ask to ensure that a tenant has the right amount of insurance for the items that they've collected over the years?
Well, I think there's two parts that I think if you own the rental property, it would certainly be fantastic if you could encourage your renters to have tenants insurance, because then they'll have protection for their contents as well as any liability that arises.
And what kind of a package do they buy?
Well, you basically
tenant?
You basically buy you buy a tenant's comprehensive package.
Okay.
And really the primary coverage with that is your contents coverage. And again, I keep harping on insurance. It's not just about your TV and your couch. It's everything that you own. So how much is it going to cost you to replace your entire wardrobe and your linens and your pots and pans and all that kind of stuff? So that's the basic part of it is your contents coverage. I know that Andrew has a good tool on his website to help you estimate how much coverage you need for that.
But also your liability coverage.
For sure.
I mean, what happens if you accidentally leave the stove on and the house catches on fire? You could be responsible for the damages. Mm-hmm. The liability coverage is there too.
And that's for the tenant as well.
And
right?
we talked about the lease, about things to put in the lease. You can require people to put to part of the lease to be actually buy insurance.
Mm-hmm. Oh, as a requirement to be able to live here in my
right.
home.
Because if there's as an owner, if something does happen, you want their policy to pay first as opposed to yours. So so if there's an egregious liability issue, their $2 million or $1 million or $2 million would kick in first, and then your liability would come in on top of that in case there was a shortfall.
That's a great point, Andrew. So basically, we also know that we really need to know what's in our home, mm-hmm. and I know that Andrew, you do have that easy way of
electronic calculator, so you can list everything and put down a dollar value, and it might surprise you actually how much you do own, because people, they assume the basics, but they don't think about all the little sundry items that are out there, and it adds up in a hurry.
Mm-hmm. So the electronic calculator, that's available through
my website at laguerrepelling.com.
Right, and then something like, can we just not go and take? It's like before you travel, mm-hmm. you go and take a picture of the contents of your suitcase in case the airline loses your bag. Is this something we should do with our homes?
Well, whether you're a tenant or a homeowner, that's suggestible to do that, because at the end of the day, the insurance company has the right to ask you to prove what you had. So you have to produce a bill, or most companies will take a picture of you standing beside your painting or with wearing your piece of jewelry or whatnot as proof of that item, depending on the value of it. Mm-hmm. So taking pictures is a good idea. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people take pictures and they put it on their computer. Well, if the place burns down, then you're not going to have anything.
And your computer is
gone.
gone.
So stick it on a stick and put it in your safety deposit box, or put it at your mom's house or somewhere else.
Or register it with your insurance broker.
So.
Patrick and Keith, can you tell us a little bit about the tenant insurance that Intact provides?
Sure. I mean, we have an all-risk policy, which referred to earlier. So it's basically it covers everything except for a few things which are specifically excluded. And basically the primary coverage on that is for contents coverage. It also has some improvements and betterments, and typically as a tenant, you're probably not making significant modifications to the place that you live in. But in the event that you did a few upgrades, it will pay for those as well. And the other portion, of course, is the liability that we talked about, and the premises liability is one component, but it's also your personal liability. So, unrelated to you actually living in that house. Again, if you're skiing at Whistler and run into somebody and break their arm, it'll cover you for that as well. The other portion with it is an additional living expense coverage. which I know Keith has some good information on.
Yeah. So additional living expenses provides coverage in the event that the unit or the house that you're renting is no longer tenantable as a result of an insured loss, and you have to move elsewhere. It provides you with coverage for costs in excess of what your normal lifestyle or your normal expenses are.
And you have an example of that, don't you?
So for example, if there was use a fire as an example, and you had to move out, and the place that you moved into was $3,000 a month, and normally you were paying $2,500 at the place where the fire occurred. So your extra expense or your additional living expense is going to be $500. You would still be expected to pay the normal rent, as that is a normal expense.
But the additional expenses that's covered in the policy would pay that extra.
Correct.
500.
That's right.
Okay.
So we'll pay the additional $500 along with any other expense that was greater than what you would normally have.
Yeah. So normally if you eat out twice a week, then that's your normal expense. But if in this case, because you're living in a hotel, you have to eat out every night, well, then there's 5 meals a week, then you have to pay that's above and beyond, and that's your additional living expense.
Okay.
And to that, we would consider things like, again, what would be your normal food expense?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I eat steak all the time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, steak and lobster every day.
So if somebody normally spends, as was said, a couple of days eating at a restaurant, but their normal groceries are this, then we would take that into consideration as well.
And what about replacement costs?
Yeah, replacement cost is.
This is for a tenant in the tenant package. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So the tenant's package provides replacement cost coverage on those contents. So if you're insuring contents at $40,000, it's really when we look to replace something. Again, if you have a 55-inch TV, that's a certain brand name. We're going to replace it with a 55-inch TV that is of a certain brand name that is of like, kind, and quality. So despite the fact that TV might be 5 or 6 years old, I mean, we're not going to take into account depreciation or obsolescence. It's going to be replacing with something of a similar model of that year.
To touch on that, though, that's provided you actually do replace it.
Right.
If you don't replace it, then you would be entitled to the depreciated value or the cash value of.
Unless you're over 50 and you bought the lifestyle advantage policy, in which case you're not obligated to replace anything.
That's right.
So, okay, just tell us a little bit about that lifestyle advantage.
Well, it's designed for the target market is 50 plus. It provides several benefits to the owner. So if you've got a house, you got 5 TVs in it, and the place burns down, you don't have to replace all 5 TVs.
Okay.
And you can replace one and take the replacement cost cash settlement on the rest.
Okay. So being a tenant and having a proper policy in place that will look after me as a tenant, what would some of the common causes of loss be for a tenant? Like, other than the obvious, which would be fire and flood, basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for a tenant, the exposures are basically the same as any other a homeowner or a condo owner or any other kind of policy. But you're really just talking about contents and additional living expense. You're not really worried about the damage to the building. So obviously, when we start looking at common causes of losses, water damage is one that is increasingly becoming more and more prevalent. And certainly water damage can have a big impact on your contents. I mean, if you have a burst pipe and it's pouring water all over your couch or your
photo albums or your computer.
Yeah, it seems like most iPods aren't or iPhones are not waterproof, it seems.
No, but you'd have a stereo system, or it leaks into your closet and ruins your clothes. And
yeah, of course. So I mean, I think when you start talking about water damage, I mean, there are things even as a tenant that you can do to help prevent water damage. I mean, if you see that there is infrastructure that maybe if the pipes are leaking or if it's not steel braided hoses, I would certainly encourage you to try to get your landlord to upgrade those. It's going to benefit them as well. Certainly, like a homeowner, know where the water shutoff valve is. I mean, just because you're a tenant doesn't mean that you shouldn't know where the water shutoff valve is. So if something happens, you're sort of the first line of defense. You hate to be standing there and 4 feet of water, standing on the phone, trying to get a hold of your landlord to find out where the water shutoff valve is. Yeah, it's important to know that.
It is. Some of our listeners might actually have kids that are in university, living on or off campus. Can you tell us a little bit about whether they're actually protected under their parents' policy, or do they actually need to have their own?
Well, with Intact, if you have a homeowner's policy, we do extend your contents coverage to your students while they're away at school.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, not to your students, but
To
to
your
your
kids, yeah.
while they're away at school attending.
They are your students.
Yeah, I guess so. when they're attending a post-secondary.
Assuming they're coming back.
Yes, you're right. I mean, if they're permanently gone, I think the key part of that is that they're still dependent.
Yes.
Now, I know to some parents it might seem like their kids are dependent for an awful long time, but it's. I mean, if you're still paying their rent for while they're off at school or when they're in the dorm or whatever the case is,
They're in your care.
They are in your care. Absolutely, they're dependent on you, and your contents coverage still extends to them while they're away.
That's a good point to know. And what is the best way to safeguard your items as a tenant? Tips?
I think in much the same way as the other policies is to do an inventory, photograph it, video it. Most of our phones and whatnot have that we can video all of our rims and whatnot.
I think there's also some recommendations that you mark your items. I mean, a lot of stolen property does get recovered.
That's
of course,
right.
Once it gets recovered, it's very difficult to identify. Hey, that's my TV.
Or that's my phone, or that's my pair of skis, or whatever. Yeah, actually, according to the Insurance Bureau of Canada, police cannot identify about 80% of the stolen property they have. So as a tenant, make your mark.
Yeah, absolutely. Then whether
engrave your name on everything. Write your name on your jeans label.
Yeah, on my
driver's license number.
Yeah, on my skis, I have engraved on them my driver's license number.
You do.
So yeah.
Really?
That's a service they do for free up at Big White. So it's it's an interesting way to do it. So if the skis ever disappear, well, that's a unique driver's license, so they're going to be able to find me.
Actually, we've learned a lot of new things today, and I hope that we've provided you with some answers and solutions for landlords and tenants in regards to insurance and reducing risk on both sides of that living arrangement. I know that Intact has more information for you on how they can fit into your community, and we're going to talk about that next. Also, Laguerre Pelling Insurance has a big involvement in the local community. Don't go away. We will be right back. You can get more information online about the products and services of Intact at intact.ca. This is CL 650.
There's still more ahead with Experts on Call on CL 650.